funding the competition. Europe just committed $11.5 billion to break its reliance on American artificial intelligence infrastructure, but the very first vendor agreements they signed were with NVIDIA, AMD, and Qualcomm. The European Union is building 7 state-funded AI gigafactories to secure their data, but to understand why the capital is flowing straight back to California, you have to look at how they structured the tender. The private capital problem, the mechanics of this July 2026 tender, reveal exactly why the narrative does not match the balance sheet. The European High-Performance Computing Joint Undertaking is structuring this as a 2-tier rollout. They are offering about €100 million in subsidies for 4 smaller facilities and $200 million for 3 larger ones. But there is a massive catch in the math. Brussels expects private consortia to cover 65% of the total costs. When the initiative was first announced, 76 groups expressed interest. Now, as the reality of financing a state-controlled compute asset sets in, the list of expected bidders has shrunk to about 10. Private capital is realizing that building infrastructure under strict government oversight completely alters the return on invested capital, especially when compared to how Wall Street is funding compute right now. The scale mismatch. While Europe struggles to raise €20 billion in private matching funds for these 7 sites, the private market is operating on a completely different scale. Just days ago, a coalition including Blackstone, BlackRock, and KKR partnered with NVIDIA to mobilize $500 billion to finance AI compute as a standard infrastructure asset class. Sovereign gigafactories are attempting to compete with the deepest pools of private liquidity on Earth, setting up a brutal structural mismatch that reveals the true economics of this initiative. The signal under the noise. Sovereign AI is just the newest geopolitical tax on compute, and American chipmakers are the designated tax collectors. By demanding localized data centers while still relying entirely on foreign silicon, this tender structure effectively transforms European taxpayer funds into guaranteed hardware revenue for Silicon Valley. For infrastructure operators, the implication is severe. If you are building facilities in Europe, you are now competing against state-subsidized sites that operate the exact same hardware architecture you do, but with a massive capital expenditure advantage. For investors, this massive gap in private liquidity redefines the value chain. The European Union is essentially subsidizing the physical deployment layer, removing the capex burden from the hyperscalers while keeping the actual profit pools locked inside the chip design and model licensing layers. State actors are funding the low-margin physical infrastructure so the high-margin tech monopolies do not have to. Watch the November 12th tender deadline closely. If the private market refuses to cover the remaining 65% funding gap, Brussels will be forced to quietly downsize these gigafactories or directly subsidize the American cloud giants they claim to be regulating. Subscribe for more